Welcome back to the Ticats review. We're talking about another loss again, two straight losses in a row. This one to the BC Lions, which is a lot more of a problem than losing to the Calgary Stampede. The Ticats losing this game in overtime, 35-32. And it's a bit of a depressing game to break down because as much as there's been a lot of, lack of a better term, explanations, excuses for this loss related to injuries, and I even saw some claims of flagrantly bad refereeing, which I don't really agree with, because if you look at it, really, BC got, I think the short end got more penalties called on them. Yes, there was a fumble that was reversed that probably should not have been. That's really about it. I thought the referees did a fairly solid job, and the injuries thing, it works when you're facing a team like Calgary, whose ability to replace the injured players that they have, the likes of Eric Rogers, the likes of Kamar Jordan, is unparalleled. This is a team that's developed a factory of receivers. Really, if you even go back to the 90s, it's amazing that the Wally Buono receiver effect has actually lasted this long, and that the Calgary Stampeders are able to find people seemingly at ease. However, can't really use injuries as an excuse for the Ticats losing to the BC Lions here, because the Lions are without Manny Arsenault. The Lions are without Solomon Alaminian. The Lions are without Travis Lulay, basically, who has been, in my opinion, the better quarterback of the two between him and Jonathan Jennings this season. I think this team, along with Montreal and Saskatchewan, have legitimate questions as to who is their starting quarterback. And, one of them was not here, and we had Jonathan Jennings. So there were certainly injuries that would offset that as well. And the other problem is that the injuries the Hamilton Tiger Cats currently are suffering from are primarily at the receiver position and then Alex Green. Now, the problem here is that from a receiver standpoint, Jeremiah Masoli, still 76% completion rating, still 2 touchdowns, 300 plus yards, no interceptions. I don't really see, yes, Brandon Banks is an amazing playmaker. Yes, Jalen Saunders is an amazing playmaker. Yes, even Chris Williams can be, although he's not been this season. I don't really see how their injuries really impacted this game terribly, because you found the deep down ball threat in Mike Jones. 2 touchdowns for him. Congratulations, Mike Jones. His best game. I've been a hater of Mike Jones for a really long time, so I'm going to give him credit where credit is due. He had a great game here. Yeah, 3 catches for 138 yards. The catch count is a bit low, but 2 touchdowns. Got open deep. I would like to see if we can work him into being a more important part of the team roster, because he was getting open a lot. If you watch plays, he was only targeted 4 times, but you'd think with the frequency he was getting open, that should have been higher. So you can say, we're without our top two, our top 2 receivers probably, and then our 4th guy probably in Chris Williams, and Terrence Tolliver left this game with injury. I really hope he is okay. We'll talk more about the hit that put him out of the game later on, but people are getting open. The ability is there. So your problems with the passing game are still Masoli sometimes not giving up on a play nearly as well, although this game didn't really have that. It was actually pretty good. He did his thing pretty well. And the lack of protection from the O-line, which was okay today, but not fantastic. Let me pull back numbers here. By the way, Hamilton had a sack for a change. Let's see here. There we are. Yeah, we allowed 4 sacks. So still problems with the line. And the thing is, that's not injuries. That's, in theory, the starting offensive line that we are running right now is the starting offensive line that we're supposed to be running. We're not really without any key components there. There are injuries on the line, but there are injuries in the terms of the depth of it. Our 5 starters are supposed to be Riker Matthews, Darius Shiratko, Mike Filer, Brandon Revenberg, and Avery Jordan. I'm pretty comfortable with 3 of those. I think Filer and Riker Matthews are solid players. Not all-star level or anything, but solid players. And Darius Schrock, I'm willing to put some time in there. He's young, so on. The question with me is still that left tackle spot with Avery Jordan. I've been harping on it. I have nothing new to add, so we'll move from there. I don't really think you can look at injuries really as a thing. I mean, we scored pretty much on par for our usual thing. Yes, the run game was a lot less effective. John White carrying the ball 19 times for just 62 yards. Good dedication there, but not a lot of yardage. And John White is not really, I mean, a guy who was an all-star level back at one point, but you can take one look at him, and I give you a hint, it's the giant brace on his knee. History of Achilles problems, history of ACL issues. He doesn't have the mobility anymore, and I kind of wish he wasn't the number 2 option still. He's a guy we put on the practice roster when Alex Green is healthy. And we like him, and by all accounts, he's an excellent, excellent guy in the locker room. But he's not really up to the task of being a starting running back. And you could say, okay, then who is? But I would prefer to go with Mercer Timmis and Sean Thomas Erlington in that regard. They're younger. They might develop into something. Whereas with John White, we're dealing with a guy who's in the wind down of his career. A career that really, realistically, for many running backs, would have ended after blowing out an Achilles and an ACL. And he's continued on, and it's undoubtedly because he has to have a great attitude and great work ethic. He put some weight on trying to become this kind of power back thing. That didn't really pan out. He's lost the weight. He's back down. And on some yard runs, he showed exactly what he can do. But on a consistent basis, I think you're better off going elsewhere with that. And that kind of, all of this kind of brings me over to the whole coaching side of this team, and we might as well talk about it. The Ticats were up 7 points late in the game, and were in pretty solid field goal range. I believe it was like a 43-yard attempt, maybe, and elected not to kick the field goal, but elected to go with Liam Hajrullahu punting the ball for a single that put the Ticats up by 8. The theoretical that I can come up with is I haven't seen a June Jones interview that really confirms this, but the reasons I've seen from June Jones' supporters is that you don't have confidence in the kicker, and a punt single is easier to get than possibly missing the field goal and having it run back for a touchdown. My problem is multiple here, is field goals are not automatically returned for touchdowns. I think there's this humongously misconception idea that that is the case. If he kicks it, he's kicking it from 43 yards, he can kick it through and kick it really hard to get for a single and at least try for the 3 points. And to not do that, it was definitively a losing move. And the thing is a lot of people will say you're using hindsight. We lost, therefore this call was bad. No, because as soon as they made the call, I think Twitter blew up with a lot of people saying it was a bad call before the result of the game, before the result of the punt even. And I was one of those. I didn't take to Twitter, but I did say it, watching the game. What are you doing? Just mathematically speaking, this move makes no sense whatsoever. And we've seen a couple of those from June Jones over the season, and I'm not fully into the people who want June Jones fired right now, because I think there's intrinsic value in a head coach who does very much inspire the players to play, and that is something June Jones has going for him. But my problem is that much like under the Kent Austin regime, not that there's a tremendous amount of similarities between the two, but I feel like the head coach has more impact on the team than perhaps he should, given his lack of CFL experience. Because you feel like the somewhat increativity in the offense, for example, traces back in a way to Jones. The lack of faith in the kicker definitely seems to trace back to Jones. And the thing is that Hajrullahu was our picked guy to replace Sergio Castillo as the kicker of this team. And the veteran, he's a guy, you either have to have faith in him or you should have gotten someone else. And I'll admit that my faith in Liam Hajrullahu is pretty limited. Not going to lie. He's missed some pretty key field goals, and lately has not played terribly great. He started the season very well, but it's been struggling lately. I think he's only missed like something like 7 field goals on the season, so it's not drastically terrible numbers or anything. But we saw him miss 2 field goals in this game, including the one in overtime. But I'm kind of willing to waive the one in overtime because, frankly, your coach did not trust you to make 43-yard field goal and elected to punt single it to not make it a 2-score game. That's got to be playing in your head. Like, I on one hand, I want to blame Liam Hierlahu because there's some stories about him not practicing terribly hard and kind of resting on his laurels in a way. But at the same time, I think when the coach sends you that message, man, is that got to be a tough pill to swallow and then get back out there for overtime. It really, really does. So yeah, in a way, I have to feel bad for him. I really do. It's kind of weird in that regard. We lost it overtime. People are going to crap on the defense for allowing that last touchdown, the Byron Burnham 2-point convert, and so on. I do and I don't. In the sense that you really should be able to shut down an offense a lot better than they did, knowing that time was incredibly against Jennings and co., and that they had to throw long balls and play a certain way, and we couldn't anticipate that and stop it. That's not good. But at the same time, just for the team, it had to be a very weird moment. And you saw also, leading into overtime, this continued, where Jeremiah Masoli was very demonstrative about being confused or disagreeing or whatever the case may have been about the third down play in overtime where we could go for it, and we took the time clock violation, or called the timeout, I can't remember what it was, and then kicked a field goal. Like that again, like that's the thing, like that's further got to play on the psyche of the kicker. Like there are some weird coaching decisions going on with the Ticats right now, and another one that I'm going to bring up is the one that I immediately noted when I looked at the depth chart and saw that Shakir Ryan was not on the roster after having a pretty solid game returning the ball against Calgary. He's out of the lineup. Now, okay, fine, maybe you want to get a look at Jalen Addison, or you were bringing Brandon Banks, and if Banks had played, I could totally understand that, but Banks did not play, so why was Shakir Ryan not out there returning kicks? I mean, yeah, you got brilliant Addison, and Addison did a good job. I think, Hamilton's proving itself to be adept at finding good kick returners, which is greatly positive because, found Chris Williams, and it went to Brandon Banks, Quincy McDuffie's been in the mix, Frankie Williams this season, Shakir Ryan, now Jalen Addison, so I mean, or Braylon Addison, I think was his name. All of these are very, very solid things, but what was with that decision? What was with that choice on the roster? What has been with the anti-anyone over 6 feet tall receiver idea that we've got going on here, where Terrence Tolliver is like the only one? We kind of let DeMar Altman kind of walk away, and it's like, okay, well, money. What money? I don't imagine that a guy who didn't even have a full year in the CFL really had any ground to stand on in terms of money. And he'd been a big play receiver. Like, and we're seeing this now when you look at our injuries in the receiving core. Why is losing a Jalen Saunders so huge? Why is losing a Chris Williams so huge, despite the fact that Williams has done very little? It's because we have no depth. We're going to the Rashad Lawrences. We're going to Felix Faber-Lucier, who has been around for long enough that I think we know what he is. He's a depth Canadian receiver. And we're having to go to him to start when Brandon Banks is not cleared for the game. And, people are like, oh, injuries. Calgary has the same problem. You have to realize that Calgary right now is down Eric Rogers, it's down Kamar Jordan, it's down DeVaris Daniels, courtesy of the Ticats. It's a team that has been rated by the NFL with the likes of Jeff Fuller leaving, with the likes of Eric Rodgers having left at one point. Now he's back in the lineup. Marquay McDaniel getting older and having to be put out to pasture in a way. Losing Anthony Parker, Johnny Forzani, good Canadian content, and developing Bress Karen to replace them, and Bagleton. And I've said this before, and I said it more about the O-line, when it seemed this kind of bizarre idea of just getting rid of people. It goes way back to the beginning of the season with, I can't remember his name now, but there was an O-lineman that we were talking very highly on, Casey something, going into camp. It's going to bug me that I can't remember his name, but we cut him. And it wasn't so much that we cut him, because, I mean, people get cut, but it was like we cut a offensive tackle import that left us with just two, Tony Washington and Riker Matthews, two starters. There was no replacement there. And sure enough, when we got rid of Tony Washington in the Johnny Manziel trade, which I still don't agree with, we've got Avery Jordan now promoted, and he's not doing very well. And granted, we brought some guys in now since... But this has kind of been a revolving door of, I guess, nonsensical cuts, weird things. Like, I mean, we kept John White, so I guess that's a sign that it's not always the case. But the depth at receiver has been compromised by letting people go for no real apparent reason. And the depth at offensive line has been compromised by letting people go for no apparent reason. And we have depth at bizarre positions that is not really required. Like, I've said this before, we have like 9 Canadian linebackers when we don't start a Canadian at linebacker. So what is that depth about? Like, that's I guess it's special teams depth, but it's a bit ridiculous. You could invest in that elsewhere. That's really actually all I got on that matter. I think I can leave it. That speaks for itself. Let's get down to like the individual player performances, because I think we've established coaching is weird. I thought Mike Jones had a big game, 3 catches for 138 yards. He didn't drop anything. That's nice. 2 touchdowns. Luke Tasker 5 for 77, caught everything thrown his way. That's good. And then really the targets go down, because, I mean, you got 6 targets to Rashad Lawrence, ironically kind of the big guy, but 4 catches, 27 yards. It's just all kind of safety release stuff, really. You targeted Terrence Tolliver just 2 times for 22 yards. Braylon Addison caught the only pass thrown his way for 10 yards. Lucier caught 2 out of 4 for 20 yards. Like, that's kind of the thing I'm bringing up here. Like, Felix Faubert-Lucier was the 3rd most targeted receiver on the team. That is not good. We talked about the run game that was dedicated but not overly impressive today. Talked about the kicking game. Arlahu going 3 for 5. Hunt. Kick return game. Braylon Addison, I think, had a serviceable game. 7 returns for 52 yards on punt. On the defensive side of the ball, we talked about we got a sack at least, but that has been a continuous problem of generating pressure on quarterbacks. Larry Dean, fantastic game. 11 tackles, great game from him. Jamal Roll, 6 tackles, although not necessarily a great thing. Same with Richard Leonard. But yeah, we got, again, 1 sack. That was from Adrian Tracy, so about time. That was another one. The whole idea that Jamal Westerman would fix a lot of our rushing problems, and that hasn't happened. It's been a frustrating season to be a Ticat fan, because it's not that they should necessarily be particularly better than their 1 game under 500 record that they are. It's not like I thought that this was a better team than I. If you had told me at the start of the season we're going to be 13 games in the season, 6-7, I would have been reasonably okay with that. It's just, there's just all kinds of weird roster moves and play calls in games and things that are going on right now that make it seem like legitimately I just don't know what's going on. And it's something that doesn't really plague any other team. Like, as bad as Montreal and Toronto have been, for example, understand the core logic of most of their player moves outside of... I really can't think of it. Outside of if they keep putting Manziel in, despite the fact that I thought Antonio Pipkin played a lot better. But... and that even has a logic to it. It's promotion. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like we're gonna look back on this season and just the moves are gonna be the thing. It's not the people will bring up the injuries and stuff, and they've been harsh. Don't get me wrong. Losing 3 of your top 4 receivers is a big deal, and it now might be 4 of 5 if Oliver is down, or if you write Mike Jones ahead of 4 out of 6. But it's been a frustrating season. Not frustrating because of results. It's been frustrating how we've gotten there. Anyways, Ticats are off to, let's see here, where are we playing next week? Tiger Cats schedule. Yeah, we come back home to face BC again. So I'm willing to say that that's a must win. There were some people that are like just happy, like, oh, we'll make the playoffs and whatever. I'm like, yes, but at some point we have to prove that we're competent enough to win a game. Keep in mind that right now the BC Lions would be the crossover team. Back-to-back games against the Lions, I don't see how you can not question this team's ability to win that game. So, this is a must-win. Absolutely.